I'm 26, and until that morning, I thought I had learned to keep the peace. I pay my rent on time, bring my parents groceries every Sunday, and smile when my father explains how the world really works. That morning, I was standing by the stove, scraping burnt toast into the sink, when he said it. From now on, your paycheck goes into my account. You don't need anything anyway. He said it the way someone might remind you to buy milk flat, factual, impossible to argue with. My mother sat beside him at the table, stirring her coffee as if she hadn't heard a thing. I watched the spoon turn circles, catching the light. She always did that when he spoke for both of them. I wiped my hands on a towel and forced a laugh. You're kidding, right? He looked up, patient but firm. You don't understand finances. Clara, it's better if I handle it. You'll thank me someday. That was the part that caught in my throat the certainty. The quiet authority that assumed my life still belonged to him, like I was a teenager with an allowance. I nodded once, because arguing never changed the ending. Sure, Dad. Whatever makes things easier. His shoulders relaxed. He smiled as if we had just solved something together. My mother finally looked at me, her eyes flickering between apology and approval, then back to her cup. They finished breakfast, thanked me for the meal, and left the dishes in the sink. I stood there long after the door closed, listening to the faint sound of their car pulling away. The smell of burnt toast lingered. It clung to the air like a reminder something small, something ruined, and still mine. A week later, Friday came the way it always did, with the clock ticking toward 6 and the sound of rain brushing against the windows. My parents never called before visiting. They didn't have to. Dinner at my place had become routine, like I was the restaurant they owned but never paid for. I heard the scrape of their key turning in the lock before I even stood up. They'd kept a copy since the day I moved in. The door swung open. Then came the pause, the kind of silence that arrives just before something breaks. The living room was empty. No couch, no framed photos, no television glowing in the corner. The walls looked bigger without everything they'd claimed as theirs over the years. My mother's breath caught first. A small gasp. My father's shoes clicked once against the bare floor. What the hell is this? He demanded. I lifted my spoon, blew on the soup, and said, I sold a few things. He blinked, trying to catch up. You what I needed some cash. I said, keeping my voice light, before my paycheck goes into your account. For a heartbeat. No one moved. Then his face went red, the color climbing up his neck. My mother pressed a hand to her chest as if she might faint, though I'd never seen her faint from anything except inconvenience. You're joking, he said finally. I looked at him and shook my head. No. Dad, you always say I should plan ahead. So I did. He opened his mouth, closed it, then turned toward my mother. She whispered one word, ungrateful soft enough that it might have been meant for herself. I stood up and carried my bowl to the sink. The house echoed in a way it hadn't in years. Every sound sharper, cleaner. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and patient, washing something old away. The next morning, the house felt too bright, too clean. Every surface caught the light differently without furniture to dull it. I made coffee and tried to shake off the echo of my father's voice. But his words had a way of stretching backward through time. I was 15 the first time he asked for my help with grown-up responsibilities. The mortgage payment was late, and he told me I could skip the school trip to the coast. You'll have other chances, Clara. Family comes first. I nodded because I believed him. When the bus left without me, I stood on the porch waving at the sound of it disappearing, feeling proud that I was useful. By 17, I had my first job at the grocery store downtown. Dad insisted I let him hold my debit card, just so nothing happens to it, he'd said, slipping it into his wallet. Every week, I handed him my envelope of cash. He called it responsible saving. Somehow, it never came back. Mom's role was quieter. She was the one who told me good daughters don't talk about money. It ruins family harmony. She'd whisper if I asked about the bills or why the electricity had been shut off again. She spoke of silence like it was a virtue, the price of being loved. I think about that now, how love in our house was always measured in what I gave up: trips, hours, wages, words. It never occurred to me to measure what I got in return. I rinsed my mug, watching the water spiral down the drain. The kitchen was so empty I could hear my own breathing. On the counter, a grocery receipt lay curled from the heat. I smoothed it flat with my fingers and thought about all the times I'd given without keeping proof. That was going to change. I took a folder from the drawer and wrote one word on the front receipts. Then I began to fill it, one line at a time, a new kind of accounting. This time, I was keeping track. 4 days passed before my father came back. I heard his truck before I saw it: old engine, heavy tires, the same rhythm that used to mean safety when I was little. This time, it just made me tense. He knocked once and let himself in. Mom followed with a casserole, her peace offering in Pyrex. They both acted like the last visit had been perfectly normal. "I brought something to make things simpler," he said, setting a manila folder on the kitchen table. His tone was light, friendly, almost proud. "You won't have to worry about bills or transfers anymore. I'll handle everything for you." The folder looked harmless, no threat louder than paper sliding on wood. I opened it and saw the heading: Financial Authorization and Durable Power of Attorney. I'm an accountant. I read contracts every day. The language was familiar, but the implications weren't. It wasn't just permission to help with payments. It was full control: withdrawals, closures, loans, even the right to sign documents in my name, the kind of power people give when they can no longer think clearly. I felt my pulse quicken, but my voice stayed steady. "That's a lot of trust, Dad." He smiled. "That's what family's for." Mom adjusted the casserole dish on the counter, avoiding my eyes. "It'll make life easier for everyone," she murmured. I closed the folder carefully. "I'll read it tonight," I said. "Just want to be sure I understand everything." His jaw tightened for a second, then relaxed. "Of course. You always overthink things." He chuckled and tapped the table once before leaving. When the door closed, I sat for a long time staring at the neat stack of papers. The words on the first page blurred, black lines twisting like wires. Finally, I stood, carried the folder to my desk, and locked it in the bottom drawer. The click of the lock sounded louder than I expected. Clean. Final. The casserole cooled on the counter, untouched. For the first time in years, I felt something sharp and alive move inside me. Not fear, not anger, something smaller and steadier. It felt like control. The following Monday, I left work early and drove straight to the bank. The air inside smelled like paper and air conditioning, that strange mix of calm and calculation. I'd been a client there for years, long enough for the tellers to greet me by name. But that morning, I felt like a stranger walking into my own life. "Can you print my last 6 months of statements?" I asked the woman at the counter. Her name tag read Maya. She gave a polite nod, typing quickly, the soft clack of keys filling the silence. While I waited, I looked around at the quiet choreography of the lobby people signing checks, machines humming, lives reduced to balances and signatures. When Maya handed me the papers, I thanked her and took a seat by the window. At first, everything looked normal. Grocery stores, utilities, my car payment. Then, halfway down the second page, I saw a cash withdrawal of $1,200 from a branch across town. My stomach tightened. I never withdrew that much. Never used that location. Further down, I spotted a credit card payment I didn't recognize, something labeled Monroe Gold Rewards. The balance was nearly $3,000. I didn't own any Gold Rewards card. I turned another page. A charge from Portland Utility Services caught my eye. The address listed wasn't mine, it was my parents'. My name sat neatly under their account. For a long moment, I just stared. The numbers looked clean, innocent. They always do. But I knew the pattern: small withdrawals first, then a slow widening of the hole until you stopped noticing what was missing. I walked back to the counter and asked Maya if she could confirm where the withdrawal had been made. She clicked through her screen. That branch. she said softly. Processed it using your card. My card had never left my wallet except for the afternoon Dad stopped by while I was in the shower. I thanked her, gathered the pages, and left without saying another word. The wind outside felt colder than it should have. That night, at my desk, I placed the printed statements in a fresh folder and wrote 2 words on the label in steady black ink, Monroe Fraud. The handwriting didn't shake. I numbered each page, one by one, until the fear turned into something else proof. They came on a Sunday, the way storms come without warning but with a familiar pressure in the air. I saw their car from the window, parked crooked in front of my house. My mother clutched her purse like a shield as they walked up the path. My father's stride was hard, decisive, as if he were entering a place still his to command. The doorbell rang 3 times before I opened it. "Clara," he said, his voice already carrying judgment. "We need to talk." I stepped into the doorway but didn't move aside. The air between us felt sharp, like a line finally drawn. "What's this about?" I asked, though I already knew. My mother's tone trembled with practiced disappointment. "You've been saying terrible things checking our accounts, making false claims. After everything we've done for you." "False?" I repeated, almost gently. "A $1,200 withdrawal I didn't make. A $3,000 credit card in my name. A utility bill from your address using my ID. You sure you want to call that false?" My father's jaw flexed. "You think you can accuse your own parents of theft of fraud? You'll regret this. Clara, no one will believe you. We raised you. We gave you everything." The words hit like a familiar melody, old, manipulative, rehearsed. I felt the pulse in my throat steady, not shake. "You gave me lessons," I said quietly. "Some of them I'm finally unlearning." He took a step forward, but I didn't move. My hand stayed on the doorknob, ready. Behind him, my mother's eyes filled, but not with guilt, only fear of exposure. "Don't do this," she whispered. "Families forgive. Families don't steal," I said. For a moment, no one breathed. Then my father's voice rose, louder than the wind outside. "You'll regret this. No one will believe you." I met his gaze, unflinching. "They will." I closed the door, slow but final, until the latch clicked into place. Through the wood, I could still hear him shouting my name, the syllables hard and breaking. But inside, the silence that followed wasn't empty. It was clean, like the air after thunder. By midweek, I started noticing the shift, the careful glances at the grocery store, the awkward pauses at church. People who used to greet me with warmth now offered hesitant smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Mrs. Hanley from the choir leaned over during Sunday service and whispered, "Sweetheart, I hope you're getting help. Your parents are so worried." Worried. The word felt like a bruise pressed too hard. I didn't ask how many people they'd told or what version they'd shared. I already knew the script. Clara's overwhelmed. She's unstable. She's ungrateful. My father had always known how to twist concern into control. I stopped attending midweek gatherings. My phone filled with voicemails I didn't answer, neighbors checking in. My mother's trembling pleas mixed with her husband's firm instructions. The silence that followed was louder than their voices. It told me I was being erased, rewritten in their image. That Monday, I made an appointment with a lawyer named David Chung. His office sat on the 2nd floor of a brick building downtown, above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and relief. He greeted me with a calm handshake and kind eyes that didn't flinch when I told him my parents' names. "Tell me everything," he said, and for once, someone actually meant it. I showed him the folder bank statements, credit reports, copies of the authorization papers. He studied each page carefully, making small notes in neat handwriting. When he finally looked up, he said something I'd never heard before. "What you're describing isn't confusion or rebellion. It's reverse financial abuse control disguised as care. They've been training you to equate obedience with love." The words settled like clean weight in my chest, heavy, but real. He explained my options reports, documentation, boundaries the law could protect. I nodded, not out of fear this time, but understanding. When I left his office, the late afternoon light stretched long across the pavement. The city hummed around me, indifferent, steady, alive. For the first time, I realized I didn't need anyone to believe me. I just needed proof, and I already had it. 3 weeks later, David called me back into his office. The sun was low when I arrived, that quiet hour between work and evening when the city holds its breath. He had a folder open on his desk, pages arranged with the precision of a man who understood both math and mercy. The total's $17,000, he said, withdrawals, credit accounts, utilities all under your name. The number didn't shock me. It just confirmed what I'd already felt in my bones, a theft measured not in dollars, but in years of silence. David leaned forward. You have 2 choices. We can send a private demand letter, give them a chance to repay before this becomes public. It's the route most people take in family cases. I stared at the folder. 17,000, and every inch of it papered over with excuses. Family, care, protection, love. I've spent my whole life giving them private chances. I said, this time, it needs to be seen. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Then we file. That night, I signed the civil complaint. My signature felt small on the page, but my hand didn't shake. The filing went through the next morning, and within 48 hours, my father received official notice. By Thursday, the news had spread faster than wildfire. The story hit the local bulletin board, the Firefighter Association's Facebook group, even the church newsletter where his name had been printed in gold for years. Retired Fire Captain Harold Monroe, facing fraud allegations by daughter. I didn't read the comments, but I saw the faces neighbors turning away at the grocery store, church members whispering in the parking lot. At home, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the rain streak down the glass. It was strange how quiet justice could sound. No applause, no triumph. Just the slow unraveling of a story that had lived too long in shadows. Somewhere across town, the man who once told me family takes care of its own was finally learning what that really meant. 3 months passed before David called with the news. His tone was even, but I could hear the quiet satisfaction underneath. They've agreed to the settlement, he said. Full repayment, coverage of all legal fees, and a signed public statement admitting fault. It's done. The words settled over me like a blanket I wasn't sure how to wear. After months of documents, signatures, and silence, the fight was ending not with fireworks, but with ink. I drove home from his office in a slow rain. The streets shimmered under the headlights, the world calm and indifferent. When I reached my driveway, I stayed in the car for a moment, letting the sound of the wipers fill the space where fear used to live. That evening, as I was washing dishes, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but the number was familiar. My father's. Clara, he said, his voice unsteady. I signed everything. It's all settled. I just thought, maybe we could start over. The words were small, almost boyish. I imagined him sitting in the kitchen I grew up in, surrounded by framed certificates and trophies from a life built on heroism, now tarnished by a truth he couldn't undo. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I wiped my hands on a towel, looked out the window at the pale light fading behind the trees, and answered softly, I already did. There was silence on the other end, no anger this time, no shouting, just breath. Then the line clicked, leaving only the sound of the rain. I placed the phone down and stood there, the quiet filling every corner of the house. It wasn't victory I felt, or sadness. It was something simpler, harder to name, like balance finally restored after a long, uneven climb. Astoria was quieter than I'd imagined a town built on fog and salt. where mornings began with gulls circling the river and ended in light that lingered longer than it should. My new house sat at the edge of the hill, small enough to clean in an hour, big enough to hold only what I chose to keep. The movers left weeks ago, but the place still smelled faintly of new paint and sea air. I owned so little now that unpacking had taken only a day. Just boxes of books, my kettle, a few dishes, and one wooden chair. It was my mother's, the only thing I never sold. She used to sit in it by the window, mending clothes while my father watched television. The wood was scratched, faded, but it held its shape steady, familiar, honest. I placed it facing the river. Each morning, I made coffee and sat there, watching the fog lift off the water like something finally exhaled. The silence felt different here, not the heavy kind that follows arguments, but the clean kind that asks nothing of you. Some days, I thought about calling home, but the thought passed like weather. Other days, I walked to the pier and watched fishermen untangle their nets, the same patient motion over and over. Repair, release, repeat. This morning, I opened my laptop and sent David an email with a single attachment, the final receipt from the settlement. Then I closed the folder marked Monroe and slid it into the back of a drawer. I sat back in the chair, wrapped my hands around the warm cup, and whispered to the quiet room. I used to measure love by what I gave. Now I measure it by what I keep. Outside, the river kept moving slow, certain, free.